Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another conversation really excited about today's conversation, which we'll get to in a second. As a quick update, for those of you in franchising that are looking at indicators of when do you switch on the budget, when do you start advancing some of your franchise development marketing, the update that I'll give you is it seems like the conversation is now skirting towards let's turn things back on lightly. What that means for you is it's time to start thinking about how do you deploy that budget that you just held on to for the last few months. We can see businesses starting to try to find a pathway to reopening in certain states. That means franchise brands are finding a pathway to opening. And today, I'm going to jump out of the way and invite Mike into the conversation. I think there's plenty of great things to talk about with you because you have some WorkForce intel. But I would love, Mike, give us some insight into you and the company as frame it up for us, and then how are things going personally, professionally, from a business standpoint? If you can frame the conversation, that'd be awesome.
Great. Well, thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Morini. I'm the CEO of WorkForce Software. What WorkForce does is we're in the workforce management space, obviously, duh, by our name. But what that means really is in big enterprises, they have HR systems and then they have payroll systems. And there's a gap in the middle there on how you handle your workforce, how you handle their time and attendance, how you handle compliance, how you handle their scheduling, how you calculate their gross pay, if there's different collective bargaining agreements or rules and regulations. And kind of that's what we do. We do that for large global enterprises around the world. We have offices in the UK, the US, and in ANZ. And for our business, we're a little bit blessed in the fact that we, as a technology company, we're prepared for the remote worker. A lot of our staff is remote. Our field people that have put in the product, that sell the product. We had a little bit of a transition from our development groups and our support teams, but because we are a technology company, we were ready to rock and roll, and we got everybody set up pretty quickly. So we closed our offices down in the UK, in the US, and in Asia about a month and a half ago, and we continue to stay on lockdown. We are engaged with our employees through the miracle of Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all the other vehicles everybody's using. We've created a really good cadence there. And we've got everybody in it together. We call our company the WorkForce family, and people are really behaving that way. We've had some hard decisions to make, just like every other company that's out there, on what do we do to weather this storm financially, and can people take some salary reductions over the short term, and can folks go on a little vacation this summer for us? And we've had I've been blown away as the CEO. We have a forum here called Ask the CEO where you can fire in confidential questions or things like that. But I've been blown away how everybody is like, hey, let's do what we got to do for the betterment of the team, so that when we come out of this at the end, we're ready to put all 650 plus of our employees back together to go rock and roll. What we're seeing in this market for us is actually people inquiring, because we handle employees touch the systems every day, and with the move to remote workers and rescheduling, there's a lot of questions with COVID and what can be done. And so we've been pretty active with our customers in building a little COVID-19 response center where they can come in and ask what state regs are changing, what do we got to do here, all the things that we help them with along the way to work for compliance, we stay engaged with. So we're still seeing activity in our customer base. We're one of the lucky ones. We have furloughed some folks for a few months this summer on departments that weren't busy during this time, like your telesales group and those folks. Not really appropriate to be selling to people during challenging times. So we've kind of slowed that down, and other areas where we could trade people in and out, so that overall at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can for the entire population, right? We don't want to do a reduction in force. Our business momentum is really good, and we expect it to come back that way as companies are trying more and more to better engage with their employees, which is kind of right where we sit in their software architecture. Personally, I'm fine. My wife and I split our time between the West Coast and in New York City. We're blessed enough to have gotten out of New York on about March 12th. And we've been out in Southern California in Marina del Rey with our nephew and our dog, and doing what we can do, right? Surviving the best you can in these times. Lots of family meals, lots of walks by the water to keep yourself busy. But our business has been crazy busy as well as we try to keep our employees and our customers engaged the best we can.
Charles, you're muted.
Sorry about that. There's a good number, Mike, of franchisees who are watching this or will watch it. A topic that came up that not confuses me, I'm just not sure where it lands, is I know in Congress there was potential legislation about providing liability protection for employers if their employees come down with COVID once everything opens up. Are you seeing anything in terms of the regulatory front, things that franchisees need to know for their workforce in terms of COVID and as everyone enters back into the workforce?
In terms of the liability piece, I'm not as versed with that as some of our, we've got legal folks on staff that do nothing but look at the compliance changes. What we are seeing, though, is practice changes. Part of what we do in the workforce management cycle is we do the time and attendance component. And that's where, whether you're in the mines or whether you're in the factories, that's where you check in and check out. You clock in and clock out. And what's becoming very clear is the old way of clocking in by punching the key code or by using your fingerprint, it's going to facial recognition. They're doing all the things that they can to see how we can measure the temperature of the person who's checking in, but also how can we measure them and check them in, clock them in for work without having them have to touch anything. So we're seeing changes in that way. I know there's some liability issues. My wife runs a small company that did the whole application for helping fund and offset the cost of payroll. We're seeing pieces like that. But in terms of the liability protection that comes if their employees go back and get it, I'm not as familiar with that and haven't heard anything pop up on my screen for that yet.
One thing that you just talked about, Mike, and I find this interesting is you think back to pre-COVID, and you can see this as a technology company that the volume of discussion around privacy has amplified to levels never foreseen or ever seen in the history of our country. Yet on the other side of this, I think this is almost shown like maybe we've gone too far on privacy, because some of the stuff you're talking about, facial recognition, temperature checking, app following, like some of this is going to be necessary for us to deal with the pandemic as long as there's not a cure. So do you see like is this a time where there's a shot to push reset on privacy and the workforce? And do you see that actually working into the favor, maybe not the favor of the employer, but back to a place that maybe is more favorable?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be paradigms that are going to go both ways, right? And I think just like we're seeing in our political landscape these days, where there's only extremes, there's nobody meeting in the middle anymore. I think what's going to happen here is there's going to have to be a recognition on the employees base that for them to be better protected, they may have to give up a little bit of a personal information or personal, whatever it is personally that they didn't want to give before. But from the employer's perspective, they're not going to be able to go grab everything they may want. So what do we need? What's the medium position that we need as employer, so we can make sure we're doing the best that we can to keep our employees safe? And for employee, we're willing to give up some of that, what we may view as confidential information, to allow the employer to work to help us keep us safer. And I think that's the paradigm, and that's the ping pong ball that's going to bounce back and forth. And what I'm hoping with people that are working to create an income and employers that are paying people is we'll see a little bit more cooperation there and a little bit more meeting in the middle than we may have on some of the political spectrums that we're all dealing with today. And just agree to disagree on some things and find a way to work it through so we keep the business chugging along and the employer can make some income, but also the employee can make some income, but also do what we can to keep the employees safe. And that's definitely going to be a balance. And the first thing I highlighted there before is, no more touching on your checking in. It's facial recognition. It's you'll see them now today as China open up and other areas open up, where there's ways that they can measure your body temperature as you walk in. I think we're going to see things like that. So if somebody pops off with a high fever as they're trying to enter the factory or the mine or Walmart or wherever it may be that they're working to check in, there's an indicator to the employer and the employee, hey, we may have an issue here. Let's make sure your health and well-being are okay.
Mike, I'm curious, because you're an entrepreneur and naturally this is your industry, and again, this sort of goes far afield from where we're at in terms of the franchise space, but on a personal level, I sort of find that stuff offensive, the road that we're going down, the fact that someone's going to scan my body and identify me. And so, I mean, it's interesting for your business, because I think we're about to enter a new world here in terms of all of these relationships, technologies. I mean, I don't want to get to the point where I need to show ID that I was vaccinated to get onto a flight or to work onto it. So, it seems like, we can't anticipate the change, but the whole employer-employee market and your industry may look very different 12 months from now, no?
You're spot on. And it's, as I said, we do, every 2 weeks, we do an update to the company. We do it by video, where I talk to the company and they can write in questions and we respond. And, I took the first information that was given by the World Health Organization and the CDC with some things that you can do to protect yourself. So I sent a note out to the entire company and I talked about it. And it kind of falls into the category of no good deed. And I got some aggressive feedback, which I'm fine with, but people were mad that I had in those bullets that you should drink water because that'll keep you flushed. And they came back and said, well, that's not the latest study. Water's not going to help you. It's not going to prevent it. Well, I never said it was going to prevent it. I just said I'm taking what the CDC and the World Health Organization is telling us that you should do is some of the steps to try to protect yourself. And what we're going to do is default to the experts, because we're not an expert in that. And I think what you're seeing is the world is changing. And my comment to the company was, look, it's my first pandemic, just like it's yours. I'm 57 years old. I thought I've seen a lot. I've never imagined this. I've never imagined being quarantined in the United States for health reasons when we're the leading edge on medicine and technology and all things going on around the world, but we're dealing with it. And again, I think it goes back to, you don't want to be, I don't want to be scanned if I'm going to walk into the Walmart to get some stuff for me to do some gardening in my yard or something, right? It's kind of offensive. But at the end of the day, if you think of after 9/11, when TSA came out and everybody was offended that people were going through their bags and the lines got longer and everything got scanned. But what was the game? What was the end goal of the TSA? It was to try to keep us safe. And I think that's the same thing that's going on now based on this pandemic that hit us out of the blue that we never would have anticipated. What do we do that is not completely intrusive, but what do we do to protect the people so that you can feel good about going to your neighborhood restaurant and having a meal and not worry that if the person sitting behind you sneezes or coughs, you're gonna risk your life or risk coming home and impacting your grandparents or your parents if they're elderly. So you're absolutely right. There and based on what we're seeing now with some of the demonstrations going on in the States that people want to be free to go to work again, I get everybody needs to make a living, and I get the states have to try to protect everybody. Again, this is where I think rational and people being reasonable to meet in the middle so that we can satisfy both sides. So we can satisfy the fact that we want to protect our population, but we also want to put ourselves in a position where we have, the personal freedom as U.S. citizens that we have to come and go as we please and visit where we want to go when we want to. I think hopefully everybody's seeing that in the personal reflection they have being trapped at home on how good we have it, no matter where you sit in the spectrum of life in the U.S.
Mike, I had the benefit and the challenge of starting our company in 2008. So when I start, I will say the talent pool was phenomenal. And that ends up being part of the edge that I was able to take advantage of, because I was able to build a superior team for a cost that was in line with what our business was and how it was scaling. My biggest fear for just the employer-employee relationship, say over the last 5 years, was that I kept on saying, I hope it doesn't shift all the way back in favor of the employer, because for the last 5 years, it's been very employee-driven. I do not go above and beyond. I expect more pay, give me a higher promotion, screw you company. And it got very aggressive, the glass doors of the world being invented and forcing companies into uncomfortable places, that unfortunately in a pandemic like this, it's almost reverted back the other way. And I would just love your insights of what you're predicting from an employer-employee relationship standpoint, because it almost seems that because unemployment just spiked out of nowhere, that one, employers are going to get back to being able to find the talent that the mutual benefit to both of them. And secondly, that maybe, as aggressive of a statement this is, I feel like this may be the first bad day for the millennial that might actually teach them a little bit more about work ethic, which might set this up for a better outcome on the other end. I would love any of your opinions on anything I just said.
I think I went through the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009 as well, and there was a talent pool that became available there in a very nice way that allowed us to accelerate some business afterwards. I think you hit it right on the head, particularly for technology companies. And I'm running one now that's out of Michigan, when I've typically run Silicon Valley companies out of San Francisco or New York City, places like that. And the big challenge we had there, and I have 2 millennials at home, so I feel very comfortable talking about this, but the whole instant gratification of the millennial generation has come into the workforce. And there's a talented group of young folks that come in. But what you see, particularly in Silicon Valley, is they get into a job, they get their salary, and they get their equity, and they're already negotiating for the next startup that comes along that may give them 15% more cash and 25% more equity before anything has matured and grown, jumping to the next one. And I remember having conversations with my son when he got into his first work in the technology space, is you got to put the time in. There's really no shortcuts to get there. And they talk about, Gates and Jobs and all those folks. Well, as well as they've done, they didn't take any shortcuts. They went at it. And if they left school, but they didn't leave their focus. And I think you're absolutely right. I think what's going to come out of this is there's going to be a pool of really talented folks that are going to need work. And so they may not be setting the bar on where their compensation is. There may be more realistic expectations, and we have a problem trying to get a developer in the Bay Area coming out of college that's demanding $250,000 immediately right away is just not sustainable, in my opinion. I think the venture capitalists are going to have to look at the valuations. I think we're going to have to look at how we're funding things. I think it may not be all about just spend to get some visibility. There has to be a balance between the bottom line, the productivity, and the experience level of the people. So I do think you're going to see a little bit of a shift. Again, with that said, talent rises to the top. So whether you're a millennial or you have 10 years experience, the people that are focused and driven, in my school, I grew up with chores, and my kids had chores, and most folks don't know what chores are, but I think those folks that don't mind doing the heavy lifting, putting the time in, and understanding that your most valuable asset when you get started is your ears and not your mouth. And if you listen and observe, you're going to learn a lot. And when you have enough data and experience, then it's time to articulate. I'm a little bit from the old school on that. My dad's line was keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut for a little while, kid, till you figure out the lay of the land. And then once you're confident you have enough data, once you're confident you have enough data and knowledge, then stand by your guns, but put the time in to learn it. So I do think you'll see a little bit of a shift there. I do think you'll see folks looking to scoff people up, because I think, and this is one man's opinion, at least in my space, in the human resources world, where as businesses get back to work, we're in a new work from home paradigm. And many of the companies that have not gone to the digital transformation to get to the cloud, so it's easier for their employees to get access and be connected and do those things, they're gonna have to crank it up quickly. And the McKinseys and the Bains of the world that do all these studies, they're talking about a potential 5-year acceleration to the digital transformation. And particularly where we sit, where we're the employee engagement pillar of the HR digital transformation, they're going to have to find better and better ways to engage. So I think you're going to see companies that are going to get aggressive with work from home employees. And I think you're going to see a population base that's out there that may not have been used to the competition that's now in the space. So they may have to accept some things they may not have wanted to accept in the past to get the job they want. Does that make sense?
Great.
It does, especially the acceleration. Mike, going forward, employers, brands, anyone out there, if you had to share some best practices, things that they need to look out for, next steps ahead, where you see employers making mistakes, what should people have on their radar?
I think it's about engaging with the employee. And what did you do during the pandemic? And what are you going to do afterwards to get an opportunity to understand, hey, your reentry into the workforce, or reentry to this company, how are we doing? What are the things that we need to do? And it's not it's a big group hug every day, but I think you're going to find the employers working more aggressively to keep a pulse of what's going on with their workforce. And we're seeing that. And it's just little things during the pandemic that companies have started to do. If you look at us for an example, I don't know if you guys know this, but we've started Story Hour, right? Because everybody's stuck at home, and we're working with our company and our employees saying, look, we know this is a challenging time. We know some of you that are dual incomes, you're going to lose your second income. We've asked you to take a little bit of a short-term reduction so we can keep the engines moving, right? We know your kids are there, and it used to be taboo, right? You have a video conference from home. If God forbid, your dog ever barked or your kid walked in the room to say something, it was like, oh my God, this can't happen. Now it's common practice, and the kids are walking in and hugging their mom and dad, and the dog's barking. My dog does a lot of barking, and everybody's like, this is okay. And we've also done a thing called story time, where we started off with me reading Dr. Seuss to the employees' kids one day at noon Eastern time, and now all my execs are doing it. And the charities we work with they're gonna read for us, and just keeping people engaged. So I think the lessons that we're learning through this, where everybody talked about it being social isolation, and it's really not social isolation. It's physical isolation, and finding a way to socially engage while you're physically isolated. And I think that's going to translate. It has to translate into the companies as we move forward. If I was in the commercial real estate business, I'd be concerned, because I think what businesses have learned is we don't need those big offices on the 55th floor on Madison Avenue anymore. We can be productive and focused with the right technology and with the right consistent engagement with our employees and their families to maybe create a better way. So they're not losing an hour and a half or 2 hours each day commuting in the major metropolitan cities. Or if you have a rock star that you found that lives in Des Moines, Iowa, sorry. You nice geography, Mike. But you don't have to make them move to an East Coast location, which will be 4 times expensive than what they're used to. So there's a balance that I think we're finding, that the taboo of the remote workforce, where the old school companies would say, no, you got to be in this office. Yes, you do lose some of the personal interaction when you're there, but you can create a cadence to create that. But the more norm can be, get them productive, get them set up, no matter where they are in the world. If it's the right talent and the right mindset, let's get that right person into the right job, and I don't really care where they work it from. And I think that's the big change that the employees are going to feel, but I think the employer has to come to that mindset of, oh my goodness, and it may register as a positive, right? If I don't have to pay for that corner office on Madison Avenue, why would I, right? Let me put that back into funds for the company.
Yeah, I mean, first a comment, then a question. My comment is I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're going to have a complete shakeup of what is the definition of a city and what is the purpose of it.
Right.
I mean, we can see that in Chicago. Forever, people have dealt with an awful commute, and the tolerance to that is going to change. And the employers are going to say, lofty expenses on the real estate that we're using probably doesn't even make sense. I think one thing that it'll be interesting to see what this plays out, and it could be a 20-year story. 20 years from now, it's a reflection back on this, on how states got disrupted, because for small business, part of the reason they don't go with distance employees is because of the tax issues, or having to set up businesses in other states. So there's some accounting complexities that have created this, and you can see that in today's pandemic environment, that states are operating as their own governments. So it is a very complex thing, but I agree. I think there's going to be tremendous shifts. I want to ask you about MVP, because I know that you're on the board on that, and I would love for you to position that. Yeah, and maybe start off by saying, does and when does sports period come back? As a former professional athlete, you should have some viewpoint. Are we going to have baseball this summer? Is football going to be a thing?
All indications, and my wife spent her first 12 years working at the NFL, and Commissioner Goodell has been a mentor to her. So we're big fans, in my short-lived career, never playing a regular season down, but trying, coming out of college with the Bills in the NFL. I miss it. I think for the first month when I get home from work, I'll get done working, I'd put on SportsCenter and then realize, what am I doing? There's nothing to watch. So we were all excited about the draft. The guy who works on me physically works on me. I've had some back issues, but he handles the Kings and he handles the Lakers and the Dodgers out here. And we were talking about it, and the talk is that the NHL is going to come back and try to do a playoff session. The talk is the NBA may come back, while the players union now may not want to. They may come back. All indications from the NFL is they're going to announce the schedules next week, and they're talking about moving it along in the fall sometime. So I don't know whether it be the empty stadiums or not, but I can tell you, the world that I live in and my network of friends, whether you were ex-athletes or not, there's something about putting some sports on the TV that or getting to go to an event, which we won't be able to go to, but something, the competition. I mean, we're all salivating for the NFL draft out of Commissioner Goodell's basement. And I was happy to watch it, to be honest with you. So we're starved for sports news and indications. I think what's going to determine is what happens with everybody busting out right now. Are we going to see that big spike in cases again, which is going to cause us to recoil again? I think if we don't see that big spike, hopefully there's a chance in the fall that we do get a little sports and activity out there to help us move along. MVP, for your lead-in, thank you. MVP is an amazing organization we got part of through, if you're a football fan, Jay Glazer, who is the inside guy on the NFL Fox network, is a good friend, and Nate Boyer, Green Beret guy, and the oldest rookie ever to try out in the NFL when he came back from his military assignment, went to the University of Texas, became a long snapper, and then got a tryout with the Seahawks. They were just chatting on Jay's roof one night when Nate was thinking about what is he going to do next, should he re-enlist? And they came up with this program, and it handles mostly veterans, but there are some athletes in there. And really what's it about is, what's the big issue that short-term athletes have when they lose, and the depression that comes afterwards, or the military guys? It's once they get out of the uniform, they lose not just the uniform, they lose the camaraderie and the teamwork and the brothers and sisters that they served with. And what MVP simply does is we're reestablishing that camaraderie and that network. And the way this works, we have 5 hubs now. We started in LA and Vegas, and then we did Chicago and Atlanta, and we just opened New York right before the pandemic. And really what it's about is we get their bodies moving. They come in, we do a 30-minute workout, and it's nothing, just get the heart pumping and get them going, and the ooh-yah and ruha and all the cheering that goes on. And then we sit around the mat, and it's the circle of trust and the vulnerability that's exposed there from these folks that don't realize what heroes they are. They forget how many lives they've saved. And candidly, the bulk of them, the military guys, have had a pistol in their mouth to call it quits. And, I think the veterans study today is it's 22 suicides a day for veterans. Since we started MVP, we've had 0. And that's really what we're focused on. And when the pandemic hit, it was a big fear of ours, because, right, as Jay likes to describe it, when they're isolated, then the extra roommates in their head come out, and they start to cycle down a bit. And so we very quickly had to figure out, what do we do? And we pivoted when they put the lockdown out here, we pivoted within 48 hours and we went to Zoom. And we've been holding the same events in New York and Atlanta and LA, et cetera, but we've been doing it by Zoom. One of the trainers does a 30-minute workout in front of the Zoom camera with music playing in his background. And you see everybody get up on the screen and they're doing their workout. And then we sit down and have the conversation. And that's where the whole concept of, it's not social isolation, it's physically isolating, but socially we have to find a way to stay connected with these folks. And I candidly thought we'd lose a little bit of the vulnerability they've exposed when you're in person on the mat. But I'm blown away that to this day, we still do. We had a reuniting 2 weeks ago in LA of the first African-American female POW in one of Saddam's army's camps was rescued by a group of guys that are part of the LA MVP group. And she was reconnected with the guy who actually rescued her on video. Extremely emotional, as you can see with me now. Crazy. But it's heartwarming and heart-wrenching. So, amazing facility. We've connected with them with Zoom, and they are heroes, true heroes. And we've engaged them. WorkForce has been a big, they made it one of our charities. We have a bunch of military guys that we hired, and they love it. And we've been an active part with them for the last couple of years. So with this story time I talked about, we decided the vets are going to do it too. So, pretty cool.
Mike, I appreciate that. I mean, talk about powerful statements, and I mean PTSD, and it's. I mean, no one really understands how hard they suffer, and it's personally, for whatever reason, my son had actually started a company to provide treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder, right, with grounding exercises. And when you hear the stories about these heroes, right, and what they've gone through, all I could say to you, and not only to those heroes, but to you for that passion and support. Thank you so much in terms of what you're doing. And Mike, I got to tell you, you really reoriented my mindset. We've had so many of these conversations, right? And you try to figure out how the dots all connect. And just listening to you about our nation's heroes, that's in a separate category itself. But as to those heroes, and even as to the employees, your point about, in this pandemic, we thought we'd be in isolation. And the point about it being physical isolation, and that's all it was, because it's turned into this amazing opportunity for social connection, right, much more than in person. And that insight, I mean, it's been there, but didn't strike me fully until you discussing that. And it's powerful too, because I think you said it well, and I see it with myself. I'm not saying I'm a good leader, but this has forced all leaders to be more attentive to those relationships. Yeah. And I think if you go through this the right way, it's going to create much better communication, relations, leadership, and connection. So God bless in terms of, those military veterans and even on the employees and everything we're all going through. Wow.
Thank you. Yeah, the PTSD thing is really interesting in that. In the way we look at it is the D comes when you don't have a vehicle to be vulnerable and express it and talk about, we've had somebody who they had a suicide bomber that was a kid they had to take out before it entered the camp, or they were given orders to shoot and they killed civilians and they didn't want to, but they were given orders, they had no choice. And if you suppress that, that's when the disorder comes in. PTS is okay. We all experience, whether it's work or military or kids with pressure from bullying. But when you suppress it is when the disorder comes. That's the belief of the guys that are driving this organization. And I've seen it. I've seen it with these vets. Some of them, even if they don't speak, some of them are not comfortable speaking. And we had 92 on the Zoom the other day. That's the great thing about Zoom now. It's not just in the regional areas we are. We had somebody from Alaska and somebody from Vermont that heard from their friend. Because of Zoom, we can reach broader than just the cities that we're in. And we're going to continue to do it because we're touching people that can't come to the gym in LA, and it's working. But when they don't suppress, when they get it out, it doesn't become a disorder. It becomes something that they deal with, that we all have to deal with the day in stretches. And that's why we're so proud. You'll hear Jay talk about all the time, no suicide since we started this. And that's really what we're focused on. What do we do to save lives in just a way that lets people communicate with each other and feel good about, we do things like the fourth time you're there, you get your jersey, you get your shirt. So again, it's back to the uniform, right? The 15th time you're there, you get your MVP hat. It's things they look forward to. It's the little stuff that actually really does matter when you're part of a team and a broader family. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work those guys do. My wife and I both are on the board and are donators too. We couldn't be happier with the impact it's having on the people, even athletes. I don't know if you remember Aldon Smith, but top draft choice for the 49ers, had all kinds of problems, got kicked out of the league. He's an MVP, been in our program. He's sober now 9 months. He just signed with the Dallas Cowboys. Brought him back. So there's stories of not just the veterans, but because the athletes are like that, right? They know one thing, and they know the locker room, and your career, average NFL career is what, 3 years for the guys who make it? And when that goes, some of them, it was their only way to get out of, poverty or whatever to get there, and they get done and they go, well, what do I do next? Where's my team? And where's the camaraderie? And where's the schedule of events? So what do I do today? Right? So it's helping some of the original concept, because of Jay's connection, with the NFL and Nate was to work athletes in it. We've had some NBA guys, we've had some NHL guys. So the bulk of it is veterans, but the athletes, they think the soldiers are cool, right? And the soldiers, they think the athletes are cool. So it's really great chemistry to watch these guys feeding off each other. Really, really great fun and very rewarding for me, to be honest with you, selfishly. Like I said, crazy.
I don't know if the dots have been connected yet, but hearing you speak, I mean, in real time, I think the issues that veterans face and athletes face at the end of their careers, it's interesting that the playing field and the work environment seems to be there too. I know every night at 8 p.m. at our house, my little kids open up the door and they're screaming outside for first responders. So now you're going to take nurses who walk the street who get applauded, or doctors where in the past they would just walk by and you wouldn't even recognize them. And they're going to go through the same challenges. And you think about just human beings in general that have been put into isolation, or things that they're going to have to lean on. How did we make progress to the veteran community on how to help be there for them? Because I believe it's not defined yet, but I feel like some of the stuff you're talking about will be absolutely applied to everybody in the human race in some capacity on the other side of this when the doors get back open. And some of the issues that people are going to go through over the next few years, whether that's depression or suicide, or just pure stress from what you had to battle through in this. There'll be a lot of similarities to probably some of the stuff that you're accomplishing as an organization on both sides.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we just held our first 2 sessions for first responders. And this was a Jay and Nate idea to say, look, they're struggling now. Why don't we get some of our veterans online with them? Let's do a Zoom for first responders. So the model that we've built here, and we were forced to pivot into the Zoom, right? Because we didn't want our guys to have nothing and the gyms were closed, right? The model that we work to is going to make sense for the first responders too, because they're going to have the same. I was in New York City for 9/11, and I remember, applauding the fire engines as they came in, and for all those months of cleanup and the work after that, after the catastrophe we saw there, and what those guys need. There was no vehicle like this for them afterwards. The VA is already overwhelmed. I don't know what some of these other charities are doing, but what we're really focused on is how do we get that social interaction to them, so they're talking to people that are. And Jay swears a lot, like the locker room, as you might imagine, right? I don't want to drop all the F-bombs and all the things that you do through basic training in the locker room and things like that. But it's acknowledging we're different. They're different, but it's okay. It's not different bad. It's different, and what's different between them is not the uniform they had on, it's what's under the ribcage, the heart. So same thing for the first responders. We got to find a way to help them engage, and so it doesn't become PTSD. It's just PTS. And we don't let it go that next route down to where it's suicidal. We get them some vehicle so they can get it out. And once you start to talk through people that had similar experience with you that can acknowledge, you'll know that they're the heroes that they lose sight of. And what I've seen with the military guys, they lose sight that they're heroes, that what they fought for lets you and I do this today, lets you and I go to the grocery store when we want, well, before COVID, right? Or do the things we want to live in the freedom we do. And for some reason, and we'll never know because we weren't there, they lose sight of that. And what this puts them in a position is they understand that, God darn it, we are different, but it's good different. This is what, not how many, a little kid comes up to a soldier and says, how many people did you kill? And it's not about how many people you killed, how many people did you save? And that's what they lose sight of on how many, we got guys that pulled 15 people out of a building that was just bombed and saved them. The stories just continue to add up, and we need to find a way to help them recognize again, and this goes right to the first responders today, these folks are heroes. They're risking their lives for you and me, and we've got to find a way to give them a vehicle so they can talk about it and come to their own self-reflection and say, wow, I really am a hero. It's okay. And I think if we can do that and touch as many as we can, God bless all of us for putting the time in and the effort to go do it. It's worth it. It's certainly worth it.
Mike, appreciate all of the insights. We appreciate you spending some time with us. Clearly the right passion, right energy. It's too bad you didn't make it to the NFL to play that snap, because you would have probably been pretty good. But
it was a good experience. It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you humbleness. The first time you fail is when you're trying to catch your dream. It's like, wow, what do you do next? So a little PTS for me. So, I get value out of sitting in these sessions and listening to these guys and speaking to them through my experience as well. So it's good. I appreciate you guys having me on and giving both WorkForce and MVP the opportunity to let you know what we're all about and how we're just trying to help people and build our company community as well as the veterans and athletes community we're working on with MVP.
Love it. Mike, we wish you the best of luck. Stay safe, and looking forward to catching back up on the other side of this.
You too, guys. Thank you again for the time. Be safe and stay healthy.